Hey guys, this is BunnyMuffins. We had a B patch for patch 11.15. This is the second week for set 5.5, and we are going to be going over every single composition that is good right now, and how to play them, what the core units are, and what you could flex in and out. So if you guys are curious in the B patch update, I have all those changes down here on my website, bunnymuffins.lol. And one thing to keep in mind is that the next patch is going to be on August 11th, which is one extra week than the regular patch cycle. But without further ado, let's get into the best comps for patch 11.15. And right now, I think Aphelios and Sentinels with Lucian are the best comps right now. They're going to be your typical 4-cost carries that you could go very, very often. And even though they're not the strongest late game compositions, for example, the Abomination and then the Invokers, which Invokers I think is the best late game comp, are stronger. It's harder to go for these comps every single game, whereas the top two, you could play them pretty much every single time. After that, in the A tier, we have the Abominations and Invokers that we just talked about, and along with the Nightbringer Yasuo, which again, you need to get a lot of Yasuos to effectively play, but when you get any of the 3 comps in the A tier, they are very, very strong. They're only not in S tier because they are situational and you can't always go for them. Now for the B tier, we have Forgotten Draven, Skirmishers, Assassins, Redeem Vel'Koz, Dawnbringer Karma, Cavalier Cannoneer, and Hellion Reroll. Then in the C tier alone, we have Kayle Knights. I don't think Kayle is that strong compared to last set quite yet, and they might need a tiny bit of a buff before she gets into the meta. I added a new section to the meta snapshot where I point out the core units in a comp when relevant. This way you guys will know which units are absolutely required for certain compositions and be able to flex the rest of the slots. I also updated the item section so you guys know which items are stronger or weaker in this current meta. But before we get into that, just a quick word from our sponsor along with a giveaway.
Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you about Wondershare from Filmora, and this is a video editing platform that is great for YouTube videos, great for also videos to use for casual sharing, but unlike a lot of other video editors, it gives you simplicity and access to all sorts of effects without being super complicated. First, I want to show you all the new effects in Filmora. These are a ton of stickers that you could just drag and drop right onto your video, and this is super easy to do. It is simply just dragging and dropping. After that, we have the simple drag and drop method again, but this time for all the sound effects that you hear in all sorts of popular YouTube videos, all in the library of Filmora. After that, you could put AR stickers, which is augmented reality, right onto your face as well in video, and you have all sorts of background effects, facial filters, and then after that, we have the integrated stock library, which again, if you are a YouTuber, drag and drop green screens of pretty much every subscribe and like animations, and then after that, we have text animations with keyframes to put them exactly where you want them to go. But if you guys want a free 1-year license, respond to the pinned comment below with the question of what kind of video do you guys want to make with Filmora, and a lucky commenter will win that 1-year free license. Download links for Filmora will be available below. It is available on pretty much all platforms, so there's literally no excuse not to at least try it out if you are into video editing. But now let's get back to the video.
So the best comp I think right now is Aphelios. This one has a lot of different variations, so we gotta keep that in mind. So again, the core units are going to be Aphelios, Action, Rel, and Sejuani. That's just 4 of the units out of the 8 you typically play per game. The units you could add after that are 2 additional Nightbringers, Ironclad, Mystic, Revenant, or any combination of what I just mentioned. In this version, we have both 3 Ironclad and 4 Nightbringers. The way you make the decision of which units to go for is whether you hit them naturally without rolling or spending too much gold, or if you need to counter a specific person in your lobby if you're in a 1v1 scenario, for example. My favorite items for Aphelios are going to be Deathblade, Bloodthirster, and Rageblade, but you could add in other items such as Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, or other attack damage or attack speed items. Action's going to be your late game, and he's going to use very similar items to Aphelios, so if you do get extra copies of Aphelios, you could even sell your current one and then swap the items over onto Action when you get him. I have all the other recommended items for Aphelios down here, but essentially all you have to do is follow the standard leveling pattern, which is getting to level 8 as safely and efficiently as possible with a bunch of gold, and then roll down for your 4-cost units, and then play a board similar to what we see here. Right now I have 9 units listed out. You typically will only have 8 in most of your games because level 9 is very expensive to get. But again, follow the core units that I list out over here, and then add in any of the combinations I mentioned here or down here. Let's go on to the next composition, which is Sentinel. This is a comp that I thought was the best one last week, but I feel like Aphelios is just a little bit better right now. The version I like the most and the one I find the easiest to play is the 6 Sentinel version. That is because it is easier to go for vertical synergies rather than the 3 Sentinel version, which is still very good, but it's just a bit harder to pull off because you need to know which units to flex in and out. Right now I'm playing with Mystics as Lulu and Gwen as my 2 additional units after the 6 Sentinels. But you could play Fiddlesticks over Lulu. You could play Rel and Nautilus over Gwen and Lulu as well. Tons of different options here because you don't need these 2 Mystic units. They're just there to complement your team. So whatever you are facing in the lobby, just add in that synergy to try to counter whatever you're facing. Items for Lucian, I like Hand of Justice or Bloodthirster for healing, and then Deathblade and Last Whisper for damage. You could also build a Warmogs on Lucian so that he gets a Sentinel buff right away, because the way the Sentinel buff works is that it goes to the person with the highest health, and that way he gets the bonuses much earlier than he normally would. For this comp, you also follow the standard leveling pattern because you were going for 4-cost units, so nothing's really changed there. If you guys are curious on what the standard leveling actually means, at the very top I have a guide on leveling over here, which has pretty much been the same for the past couple of sets, but you guys can check that out, or check out the cheat sheets on my website up here where we go over when to hit every single level. Another interesting thing to try is going for 4 Cannoneer. You could do this with either a spatula item or by running 3 Sentinels and 4 Cannoneers. On to the next build, we are going to talk about the Abomination build. So Abominations, they got nerfed a lot last patch, but it turns out this comp is still really strong because people figured out how to add in Heimerdinger. So before, people were mainly just playing Zyra with the Abominations, but now they added in Heimer as a late game bomb as well because he uses the same exact items as Zyra, and you could also get Heimerdinger from 5 Draconic Eggs, for example. Typically, the way you play this comp is going for Draconics in the early game along with the Abominations. We don't see the Draconics in this team right now because we sell them in the late game, but typically I like a mix of damage and tank items on my Abomination units, and I also like to put a Radiant item on them as well. After that, for Zyra and Heimerdinger, they like Spear of Shojin, Jeweled Gauntlet, and Archangel Staff, and then I like to add in Revenants because Fiddlestick is a Revenant, so I add in Volibear and Ivern because that just gives a lot of tankiness to your team. The way you play this comp is that you slow roll for Zyra 3-star on level 7, or you go for a Heimer 2-star at level 8 or 9, and all that just depends on what units you are hitting during your game. Let's move on to the next comp, which is Invokers. This is by far the strongest late game comp that is hittable. Obviously, the best late game comp is every single 3-star legendary unit, but that is not going to happen in most people's games. I don't know if that's actually happened ever. I don't know if anyone's hit like multiple 3-star legendary units in one game. If you guys have had that happen, go ahead and post a game in our Discord at discord.gg/BunnyMuffins. We have a community of a lot of other TFT players in there who are all really active and like to talk about the game. But back to the Invokers, this comp is pretty hard to pull off because you either need to get lucky or really know the limits of your team strength throughout the course of the game. The reason why this comp is hard is because look at this. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 legendaries in this team and then 3 4-cost units, which means that it is pretty difficult to hit, and you need to be flexible on the carries. For example, we see that we have Heimerdinger carry right now with the Shojin, Archangels, and Jeweled Gauntlet, but let's say we don't hit Heimer, but we hit a Teemo 2-star, you'll need to know what to swap in and out in those situations. A popular way to get into Invokers is from the 6 Dawnbringer build with Karma, so you also have to know when to swap out into this comp and sell your Karma to throw the items on other people. For tank items, I like Warmogs a lot on Garen. It just makes him super tanky because he gains a shield based on his max health. And then I also like putting the Heimer turret in the bottom right corner because I feel like it gets the best hits off in that spot. I wrote like a tiny blurb on it over here, but pretty much you need to get Heimer's 1-star on level 8. If not, I don't really like to transition into this composition. The reason why is because I'd rather just play my current board than sell everything and try to go for a full legendary comp in most of my games, unless, again, you are getting lucky or you had a huge win streak in the early game with a ton of health and a lot of gold to roll for this comp. Next up, we have Nightbringer Yasuo. This one has a lot of different variations as well. Right now, I'm showing you guys the 6 Nightbringer version, but there's a 3 Skirmisher version. There is like an Ironclad version, and essentially I talk about it down here. Again, the core units that I point out are Yasuo, Diana, Lee Sin, and Sejuani. That's just 4 units. The rest can be flexed. So we could take out Vladimir, Riven, Rel, and Aphelios, and then just play whatever 2-stars that we hit or whatever is good against the enemy teams. The only items that I think are like absolutely required are Runon's Hurricane and Rapid Fire Cannon. The third item for Yasuo could be Hand of Justice, it could be Jeweled Gauntlet, or a bunch of other things as well. But I think Runon's is by far the best item, followed by Rapid Fire Cannon. But essentially, to play this comp, you just slow roll on level 7 because level 7 gives the best odds of hitting a 3-star Yasuo. So you want to be rolling the majority of your gold on level 7 by doing a slow roll, which is essentially just rolling down to 50 gold every turn. If you need help on that, check out the leveling guide in the description. I believe I link it there somewhere too. This comp again has a really high cap because 3-star Yasuo absolutely shreds through so much of the front lines in the game right now because he deals just so much damage and he doesn't really care too much about resistances, and that's why I like to buff him up with the 6 Nightbringers. Other people like to play Jax and Aurelia, and that's a good combination as well because you get Skirmishers with Lee Sin and you could itemize other people so you're not as reliant on Yasuo. So onto the next builds, we are into the B tier. So first one we're going to go over is Forgotten Draven. Draven just hasn't been as strong as he was last set because his twin brother Mordekaiser just got taken out of the game. But luckily, Forgotten did get changed a little bit, so they're a little more easy to play because there are more thresholds to hit them on. So this is a pretty good top 4 comp, in my opinion, if you just want to get a top 4 and not necessarily a win without going to level 9. I like putting my tank items on Hecarim, and I like putting Draven in the second row because he has short range, so he doesn't have to waste so much time walking around the map. Last Whisper, I think, is a must on Draven, and Bloodthirster is just like the best regen item on Draven, and then after that, attack speed with Guinsoo's Rageblade is pretty good, but you could go for pretty much anything for more damage, such as like an Infinity Edge instead of Guinsoo's. For this comp, you want to do a standard leveling pattern, and you could also do a version with 4 Forgotten with 4 Knights instead of 6 Forgotten. After that, we have Skirmisher Knights. This is a comp we talked about last patch, but now a lot of people are playing this, so it's not as good anymore. It was really only good for that 1 week because no one else was doing it. No one was really playing too many of the Knights or Jax in general, but it's still decent, it's still playable. Same items on Jax as before, but sometimes people like adding in a Runons or an RFC on Jax instead of full damage like we have here. But from the feedback I've been hearing from people who watched the last video last week because they're subscribed to the channel, if you guys haven't done that yet, essentially if you are subscribed and turn on notifications, you get to know what's best in the meta before everyone else. So if you haven't done that yet, I do suggest doing so. But from what people have been telling me throughout this week, they've had great success with this comp, and it's also pretty easy to play. The reason why it's easy to play is because Knights transition really easily to the late game because you have 2 1-star Knights, which you could just use as item holders and then sell off for something else later on. Now onto the next build, we have Assassins. So Assassins, people have been requesting me to do an Assassin video. I'll try to play Assassins in like the next couple days. But essentially, you just like to have a lot of damage on Nocturne, get a 3-star Nocturne, and he just pretty much solos everything. So a lot of people were commenting about Gwen, how Gwen doesn't give her damage reduction to Assassins, but in this build with this positioning, she's still giving the shield to Fiddlesticks, Ivern, and Volibear, which is pretty much all the other units in your team, and Mystics are still pretty good, and she is going to be a legendary unit, which is always welcome in any team. For Nocturne, I like having Runons for sure. Last Whisper is good for killing tanks, but he kind of doesn't need that in the beginning of the fights. It's more towards the end where he needs it. And then Guinsoo's is just one of the best attack speed items for Nocturne because he just loves attack speed because he gets a bonus every couple of attacks. For positioning, I like putting Pyke and Viego on opposite sides. And then Diana, I like throwing her wherever their carries are. For spatula items, I like getting Assassin Spatula because then you could add in Kha'Zix to go for 6 Assassin, which is even stronger because Nocturne just like pretty much rips through everyone if you ever get to 6 Assassins. The way to play this comp is you slow roll on level 7 for Nocturne 3-star, and that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a pretty easy comp once you know you are going for it, and you pretty much just rinse and repeat the same thing every single turn. Now onto the next build, we have Vel'Koz. I really don't like Vel'Koz so far this set. He's just not as powerful because I think they nerfed him too much towards the end of last set, and he just never really regained his strength since then. But he's still decent, he's still playable. It's like, I'm not hating on Vel'Koz, they're just better 4-cost options that I like to play instead. But he likes having Jeweled Gauntlet, Hand of Justice, and Spear of Shojin. Spear of Shojin and Jeweled Gauntlet are pretty much essential on Vel'Koz. Without them, he's pretty useless. Luckily, a lot of the other ability power champions can use these items, and if you guys are thinking about going into the Invoker build because you're running Ivern and Syndra already, you have pretty much the same exact items that you'd want for Heimerdinger in the late game, so you could easily transition into that Invoker comp that we were talking about before. But apart from that, regular standard leveling pattern because you are going for 4-cost carries, so nothing too crazy over here. Next build, we have Dawnbringer Karma, another 4-cost carry, but this time Karma uses blue buff instead of the Spear of Shojin, so it's a little more difficult to transition into other team comps, but if you go for the Invoker build, blue buff on Teemo works really well, so you could go for a Teemo carry instead of a Heimerdinger carry in that build we checked out earlier. The reason why I like the Dawnbringer Karma build a lot is because it's really cheap. You're running a lot of low-cost units compared to other compositions, but you have to keep in mind that they aren't like horrible garbage units just because they're cheap. They're giving you the 6 Dawnbringer buff, which makes them really tanky, and Soraka gives a good silence, Riven gives a stun, Gragas is really tanky for a 1-cost unit in the late game. The only one who's kind of bad is Nidalee, because without items she really doesn't do anything, but there is like a rare build with Dawnbringers where you go for Riven 3 and Nidalee 3-star, because if you don't get Karma items and you get a ton of Riven and Nidalees with items for them, you could just go ahead and slow roll for those guys to carry you at level 7. And I've seen that been executed pretty effectively by a couple of players. It's just not something you go for that often, but I do want to mention it to give you guys the option there. Next build, we have the Cavalier Cannoneer build. This build got nerfed because Hecarim got hit in the B patch, if you guys didn't check out the notes before. Still decent, but like B tier isn't that high, you know. Also, this comp is really dependent on how many people are going for this in your lobby. If no one's going for it and you get a decent start for it, like, you're going to be doing well that game. However, if you are contested by other people, it's going to be really difficult to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but whenever you're contested, you're never ever happy about it, you know? But you put a bunch of tank items on Hecarim. I like getting Bramble Vest and Sunfire Cape, and then some people like Warmog, some people like Ionic Spark, some people like Dragon Claw. It really depends on what you're facing. The reason why people go Warmogs is because Abominations are really popular. So if you don't have a Warmogs, Nunu can eat your super tanky Hecarim just because Nunu has more HP than him. And you don't want that happening, so that's why you put the Warmogs on Hecarim if you're facing a lot of Abominations. Items for MF hasn't really changed. You just go Shojin, JG, Hand of Justice, and you guys probably already figured it out. Let's say you go for this build, you build the MF items, but you're not getting like 3-star Hecarim, you're not getting 3-star MF anytime soon. You could transition into a normal comp and then go for the Invoker build later in the game. I'm not saying do this often, but it is an option for you guys to consider when you're playing the game. If you guys haven't noticed yet, TFT, there are a lot of different options you could choose to pursue. And you're not always tunneled into a certain comp, and you just have to recognize which games you are and which games you are not. On to the next build, we have Hellion Reroll. Hellions are kind of weird. Like, you go for 3-star Tristana and 3-star Kennen in this build. You essentially reroll at level 6 for them. Kennen is really good with GA Morello. Tristana, her best items by far is Runon's Last Whisper and Bloodthirster. I wish this build was a little stronger because I think Tristana is a really cool champion because she jumps around all over the map. But this is the current build that people are doing for Hellions. I like running Senna as the extra Cannoneer because sometimes you get Senna to 3-star, but if you don't get Senna, swap her for Lucian just to add in the Cannoneer buff. After that, I like adding in Rel because Rel is just super tanky and super good in this metagame. I mean, she gives you an AoE stun and you're already running Cavalier, so it's kind of a no-brainer just to throw in a Rel in this game. You could also add in a Kled carry by putting in attack damage items on him too if you get him to 3-star and you have excess items. Not that great of a build, but if you get a good Hellion start, it's something to consider. Last build we're going to go over is the Kayle Knights build. I don't really recommend playing this that much, but I know a lot of people, for some reason, people just love playing Kayle. This is what I've found people have the most success with. I haven't tried it out myself, but I see that people put Gwen in the middle of their entire team, put Lux in the corner to give shields, and essentially just pray that Kayle scales into the late game. So now onto the items, we have Sword at the top. There are just so many good comps that use Sword. We have the Aphelios comp, we have the Lucian build, Draven uses it, and if you ever need Spear of Shojin, you need the Sword anyways. After that, Glove is really good because Hand of Justice is back in the meta. Belt, so good because Warmogs is needed for so many different tanks right now. Like, Rel uses it super well, Garen uses it well. Sunfire is great on Hecarim and things of that sort. After that, Chain, if you need Bramble Vest, it's pretty decent. And then Tier, I like Tier because you need Spear of Shojin, you need blue buff on certain champions. Redemption's good, Hand of Justice is good. Just lots of different things you could do with Tier. After that, I feel like there's a drop off. Bow is kind of like alright. It's really only good for like Yasuo builds. You will need a bow eventually for like the Lucian or the Aphelios builds, but you definitely want to prioritize swords for them instead. After that, Rod, AP comps are good, but I feel like everything else is just that much better. And then Negatron's still the worst item. Dragonclaw did get buffed in the new set, but I just don't think Negatron's that great, just because still it doesn't build that many good items. They're more like situational items. But here's the item quadrant that I updated. You want to build the items on the top right. Those are both strong and versatile items. Avoid the ones on the bottom left, as left means situational and bottom means weak. Honestly, right now, I feel like a lot of items are buildable. The only ones that I don't think are buildable are like Quicksilver and Hextech Gunblade. Everything else has like some situation where it's somewhat useful. Obviously, like the top left items, they're very, very good on specific champions, but it's hard to really judge. But that really just depends on what comp you are going. For items that are just universally very strong, Warmogs, Hand of Justice are going to take the cake there. Other tank items such as Redemption and Bramble Vest, just because people need tanks. And then Sunfire Cape's good for early game, Zephyr and Shroud are great for late game, but that is going to be pretty much it for this week's meta snapshot. Just to sum up again, we have the B patch up here if you want to review it on my website, and we have the comps right here. Personally, like, my favorite one to play is the Sentinel comp. I'll probably do a Sentinel video, like a 3-hour compilation of just playing Sentinels, just because I like playing Lucian, so definitely look out for that in the future. But apart from that, good luck on your climbs, guys. I saw some people DM me saying like, oh, like I just hit Masters or something like that. And I'm glad people are climbing watching these videos. And I'm glad that you find like the website and the channel like helpful. But don't forget to check out the description and the comments below as well, because we do have a giveaway for Filmora. But apart from that, I will see you guys later.